All right. Yay. All right. Welcome, everybody. Thank you, gentlemen, that have chosen to courageously step into the Zoom room and be a part of this conversation. Appreciate you guys being here. We're also broadcasting this live on Facebook, which may not last depending on how well the broadcast comes out. I don't have the fastest internet where I am right now, so if you find that at some point we may cut this off, and for those interested in the conversation, this will be recorded and I'll post it at a later date. Yeah, so I want to welcome Ilan Stephani as my guest here. And briefly, and it's a new context. And also, I just want to give you permission to let me know at any point if my audio cuts out or something like that. I might freeze up, but just so I can repeat anything that needs to be repeated, that would be great.
So you have been frozen for something like 5 seconds, a few seconds ago, but I think I didn't miss something essential around your introduction.
All right, good. All right, so I'm going to share a little bit about you. So Ilan is a cutting edge somatic researcher and down-to-earth modern mystic. She focuses on embodiment tools, health, sexuality, collective trauma healing, and mysticism, and has gained nationwide attention with her best-selling book, Skin and Games. So thank you for doing what you do. I love your bio. I resonate a lot with it because I feel like I'm maybe doing some similar things in my own way. And yeah, so I'd love to open up this conversation and explore a little bit of the topic of your book, because some of the men that are joining us in the Zoom room have been reading it. I've been reading it, and it's a really powerful book. And what I love about it is it's sort of the best way I can put it is it tends to be focused on like breaking a lot of the assumptions we have around sex, sexuality, prostitution, men, masculinity, male sexuality, all these things. And I love these kinds of conversations because I feel like they're so necessary. We all live in these bubbles of assumption so much of our lives, created by culture. And I'm very much of the interest of living in a place where we can invite not knowing and not assuming, because there's so much power there. And so I'd love for you to share a little bit about your background, in particular for the people that don't know about your book or the context, and sort of what led you to your career, temporary short-term career as a prostitute, and maybe speaking a little bit to what you came away with from that whole exploration. Yeah.
Thank you for the invitation and for your work. Vice versa. Yeah. So I know that when I say, oh, I worked as a sex worker, it's a kind of outstanding topic. It's a little bit like, wow, I have something to tell. And at the same time, I think one secret of prostitution is there is no secret to it. Like prostitution, like many other topics in our life, they have something specific. But I think what I was so fascinated in when I started working as a sex worker was that I could break through cultural role models. I could disappoint the expectations, because I have this super A levels and everybody expected me to study philosophy, etc. And then I was like, oh yeah, Not really. I'm working in a brothel and I'm super happy as a whore. So there is no faster way to destroy the small cage of a good girl. So I think this is what was so thrilling, and this is what was so liberating, or one of those super liberating aspects of sex work. In my case, I'm not saying, hey, work as a sex worker. But I am saying that it is super powerful to break cultural expectations, because as you say, Soma, they are created by culture and they create suffering. So it's like, what does it need? What do I have to try in order to break free from my suffering, from the cultural cage? And then, yes, there were other kind of subconscious motives for sex work. It has had nothing to do with me needing money. I didn't need money. There was no person in the background. Like every person in my background was like, Ilan, are you sure about that? Just so everybody was surprised. So nobody was pushing me into this direction or had any advantage from me working as a sex worker. But I had so many advantages, because I realized, wow, when I am this 18-year-old girl at school, like I'm taught about math or whatever by elder men. And there is always a hierarchy. There is always a teacher and a student. And when I started as a sex worker from 19 to 21, from the very first day, I was like, I never ever experienced before men talking with me on the same eye level. Like never ever before. So it was the opposite of our presumption or assumption that they are like topping the woman or abusing her. It was like, it was, they were aware of the fact that this is a kind of taboo or forbidden space. So what do people do? What do men do? What do men do with their sexuality when it is a hidden space? They are seeking for safety and not for raping somebody. So I was surprised by the need and the urge of really, really inviting me into an eye level contact and conversation. And I had super, super polite and sensitive experiences with my clients. So to some extent, I could also flip it around. There was a lot of love that was shared because the space was safe. It wasn't the cultural, you have to be this man and you shouldn't be this man, but it was kind of, we are socially dead. You are a client, that's super taboo. I'm a whore, that's super taboo. So we lost. So what are we doing with our freedom? And the freedom is filled, especially by men in sexuality. That's my sense. When men feel safe, they turn out to be no, not a cultural monster. So I think this kind of assumption that men plus sex is a danger, it just puts more trauma and illusion into our generations. So I think this was the biggest needle mover for me, wanting to share about these experiences in a book. And it's not about, oh, everything is love and light. It's not about men are perfect, but it is about, we really, really, really have to recover from cultural hatred towards men and from cultural male self-hatred, because nobody teaches you that it's a gift to be a man. And that I, in sex work, experienced something so contrary to what my culture taught me about men being the perpetrators and women being the victims. That was something like, hey, I need to write a book. So that's why I'm also like, if anybody is here who read the book, I'm honored. Thank you so much. I mean, this is amazing. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Thank you so much for sharing that. And you know, what popped out the most for me from what you just shared was around the being in this space where both parties were kind of in this somewhat taboo role. What you noticed, for whatever reason, we don't necessarily understand why, but like you found that men were kind of just seeking a sense of safety with you. And yeah, and what would you say like that was about? Like what was the, like obviously like safety is a broad term, right? So did you notice any kind of patterns around like what type of safety, or what was the sort of need within
Mhm.
that might
Yeah.
have shown up?
So I think in general we are super afraid of each other, and men are also super afraid of themselves. I mean, women as well, but as a man, I imagine, like, if you are told since a young age that being a man is also dangerous because to some extent you are a potential rapist, then of course you are super, super terrified by the potential of your body. And for me, being conditioned as a woman, that's not the case. I'm not terrorized because I'm having a vagina and I could kill you, but I could be killed by you because I'm having a vagina. So for me, it's I'm afraid of you, and for you, it's yes, and I'm afraid of you, and I'm afraid of myself. So like
Oh yeah,
my
right.
problem is worse. Just saying. So yeah, coming from this analysis or background or thesis, which totally makes sense to me in a patriarchal system like ours, it's mainly that whenever in a patriarchal system a man approaches a woman with desire or love, he enters her space, just her energetic space, and she stops feeling safe because he is present and he is stronger than her. So that's
Mhm.
like, it's such a dilemma. You can never approach a
Yeah.
woman naked with your genitals, with your body, with your eyes, with your sharing, with your story, with your whatever, with your pure physical existence. She's naked as well. Sex is an option and it's not a must. All of these, there are so many filters, there are so many armors, there are so many walls. And so many walls, of course, are put into the space by the woman who says, don't kill me and don't rape me. And I learned that I cannot defend myself, which is totally wrong because a female body can kill in the same way like a male body, like every other body. However,
Mhm.
we do not learn that. And that's a problem, that we shut down and collapse and feel helpless before time. So coming from this story, that's kind of the official, the narrative, the collective narrative in the official world, we create unofficial spaces where we can experience something else,
Mhm.
something with less walls. And then, for example, prostitutes are perfect because prostitutes like, I'm not having a problem with men. I'm not having a problem with sex. Come on, come on. So there is like,
Mhm.
wow, there is no wall. And
Right.
this absence of walls creates a sudden relaxation. It's
Mhm.
amazing. As a
Yeah.
prostitute, I realized, wow, this thing, it was present in my mind that men are not criticizing women, but women are criticizing themselves and each other for their outer appearance. And as a prostitute, I deeply realized how much this is true. It was like they just relaxed. No fight, no push, no urgency. So much
Mhm.
space. Up to the point that me and colleagues, I think 1 in 4 clients at least, we didn't have sex with them. And
Wow.
everybody paid the same price without any kind of hesitation or questioning, just because it's almost the socially dead room that will be a secret, and where a man can feel as if being okay, or can feel right, can be okay for a woman in a woman's eyes. It's mainly this. And I think even when we had sex, sex in many situations had only be the kind of vehicle for this message or this
Mhm.
matrix. And we can say, yes, but that's a matrix for the brothel. But I think the energetic safety and relaxation with each other and the option for sex and no urgency for sex, I think that's not a matrix of a brothel, but a matrix of a pretty sane culture, less
Mhm.
distorted and less terrorized and less fragmented than our official world. So this is my perception why men felt so much safer with a prostitute and then opened up with so much care and so much
Mhm.
sensitivity as well. It's almost like it's not the bad soul that opens up. It's the truth that opens up. And the truth is a lot about yes, also a story that is full of grief or anything, but it's around anything that people learn to suppress, and men learn to suppress their feelings and their sharings for sure.
Hmm. Wow. Yeah, that's powerful. Yeah. So it's like what I'm taking away from that is this, you know, the way that we've, as men in general, have adopted these stories about our sexuality and our masculinity, and how we, hold those over ourselves. There's certain environments that we can enter into, and let those kind of fall away, and maybe have space to discover something new, or reveal some more vulnerable piece without the sort of pressures of what it means to be a man, or you know what our sex.
You're frozen a
It's
little bit.
been
Yeah.
okay. Gotcha. I don't know.
I mean, I can hear you
Okay.
again. I think I got most of what you said. So
Okay. Yeah. I was just pulling apart a little bit of what you shared, and kind of interpreting it in my own way of experiencing the world as a man, and even as a man that's done a lot of self-reflective work around myself and sexuality, it's so challenging to kind of pull myself out of that collective story and identity of myself and my sexuality. And so I love it that that's that was a space that opened up stuff for men, and it really, it inspires me, not to say this is the only place where men can open those things up. But it inspires me to like imagine what kind of environments we can create for men, especially around sexuality, because it is such a force, and it has power, and it has stigma, and all of this. And I think a lot of the, like you said, a lot of what gets created around it is culturally based, and it creates this kind of, it actually creates the pressure, is what I'm taking away from what you
yeah,
shared. It's like we can't be who we are,
yeah.
and yet we're expected to be a certain way, and it's just like this, pressure in all directions. That's a hard place to live as a human.
Totally. And as a man, I think also for men, I see the disadvantage that there is less man movement than there has been a women movement over the last centuries all over the globe. So I now feel like I'm standing on the shoulders of giants, of super courageous women standing up for their rights. And for men,
Hmm.
it's so essential that this is happening as well, just because if one sex loses, all sexes lose. There is
Yeah.
no winner in the patriarchal system. It's
Yeah.
just hidden and maybe even trapped in a even meaner way how men are the losers, because they lost the trust. To some extent, they lost the heart in sex, the heart of the woman in sex. And that's a tragic deal, because you can only lose, you can only miss, you can never be nourished.
Hmm. Yeah. And what that brings up for me is like, I think where we're at currently, because there is like a growing movement of men, doing inner work and working on themselves, and it's beautiful to see that. And and I think there's still this cultural story of like, male privilege, and the patriarchy, and obviously there's some truth in that, but men are also victims of the patriarchal story, right? The patriarchal paradigm. And so it's what I see is like, men are not allowed to complain, like men are not allowed to like have a problem, because we've had the privilege, right?
Yeah.
And that's a pretty painful thing for a lot of men, because it's like yeah, again, we're not safe. We're not safe
Yeah.
to have our experience.
And it won't work by one sex heals first, and because us women, we need it more, so we heal first and then it's your turn. It won't work like that. The more I unwind my collective trauma stuff, the more it helps me that you are unwinding your patriarchal system trauma as a man at the same time. So there is no concurrence. There is no such thing like a better order. And I think many men are holding back with their own process because they want to hold the space for the women who unwind from fear and abuse. And
Mm-hmm.
it would be so wonderful if we see, hey, we can only contribute to each other, either in terms of vicious circles, as we have been doing in the last 6,000 years, or in terms of an upward spiral that is really, wow, now you feel safer with me. Wow, now I feel desired. Wow, now I feel that I deserve it. Oh my God, I'm gorgeous. Oh my God, let me give you, let me invite you. There is something like, it can be so easy. But if then the women are like super strong and healed, and then the men are still shut down, that's tragic. And the other way around as well. It's just the disbalance was created altogether, and it will be unwinded as a collective process. To some extent, it's a very intimate process with the collective and with each other and between the sexes. So I'm also not saying, hey, go into a brothel and heal your wounding. I'm not saying that's the best
Right.
space, but whatever works for you in terms of getting a taste of being okay as a man and being safe with a woman, that's an interesting thing. Just the energetic experience. And I don't care if it's happening through sex or with a woman or with money or forbidden or official. I don't care about this stuff because it's just an ethical blah blah. It's a mind fuck. I mean, I'm from Germany and here we are pretty good with morality. So I'm pretty certain around morality doesn't get us anywhere because it's based on we need to tame the human essence. And I disagree with that. The human essence is wonderful. The male sexual essence, for example, is wonderful. It's just a blessing, period. It's like, I'm exactly my opinion. I'm so certain about that. But then the monster figures come from us never approaching the essence and then telling us some ghost stories around it or monster stories around it. And as you said, the suppressed energy. Because energy who isn't allowed to flow, who is blamed as bad instead of just being diagnosed as stagnant, it's always explosive. We see that in sex, we see it in war, we see it just everywhere. We see it everywhere in depression. It's always explosive and a disaster when we make energy that's meant to flow, make it stop and make it be stagnant. So that's also, I celebrate men's movement, and at the same time, hey guys, I want to invite you to explore all of the stuff that you are doing, because you are so much more capable of even so much more self-love and energy, etc., instead of trying to fixing yourself or, let's say, saying sorry for what your fathers did. That would be my wish. And it's the same wish for women. I see it over and over when women are working on themselves. They have to improve themselves. It's based on it's based on essentially self-hatred. So let's jump into the men movement and the women movement and the all together movement, because we deserve paradise, because we are designed in paradise. Come on. And not because I'm a sinner and I have to make something better.
I totally agree. And even if we weren't raised under like a religious dogma, like I didn't get that kind of upbringing, but I think it's worldwide cultural. It's just sort of built into the human psyche for whatever reason. And I think I see a lot of men getting into personal growth and self-development from a place of something shitty happened, right? Some pain occurred, and it's like, how can I fix this? Like, what's wrong with me? I did, that's what led me to work on
I do
myself.
too. It works.
Yeah.
Suffering wakes you up.
yeah. So, it gets us here. And right, I totally agree with you. At a certain point, it's like, it's not about fixing anything. It's about like, wow, I'm fucking amazing and beautiful and all of me. And I'm still working on this process. It's kind of ongoing,
Yeah,
but
me
that
too.
feels like my primary piece of work in life is really acknowledging every part of me is sacred and beautiful and holy in a way. And I really believe that's like sort of the alchemy that
Yeah,
changes it from something that can be a destructive force into something that can be a healing force.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And I think, yeah.
Yeah. Go ahead.
You mentioned it a few minutes ago, and now again, this kind of, let's say it in my words, you are a student as well, and I think there is no better movement than a movement by all of us being students of the time and of our potential and of life. So it's really not about, oh, I recovered from my childhood stuff, but it is about almost like the experts need to be trained in getting up when they failed again and again and again. They need to be
Mm,
trained in that the most, because everybody will fall, everybody will fail, everybody will do something that is like a mistake, or will fall behind the standard that was established yesterday and the breakthrough, etc. So it's like, let's be masters in getting up no matter what when
mm,
we have been fallen. So I think that's a very important thing, because also I see it when I talk about aliveness or teach embodiment tools or whatever. There is so much projection going on, as if I would know something that somebody else wouldn't, or if I would be more healed than somebody else. And I think at least the opposite is true. So to some, it's
mm,
ridiculous for me to be seen as a teacher who knows, teaching people who wouldn't know. So I really want to appreciate also your transparency with that, Soma, in terms of, it's an amazing amount of work, and it's my life topic, and it's so worth it. But it is us sharing, and it is us growing together and inspiring and teaching each other by being students and not by being the heroes. So yeah, I really want to appreciate this, this emphasis that you put into this point. And I agree so much, like from my side, it's not a heroine journey of, oh my God, you poor humans, but it's really coming from trauma. I mean, why am I in trauma? Because I'm traumatized. So it's a very simple thing. And I
yeah.
see no reason to hide.
Yeah. Yeah. Let's talk about trauma a little bit, because I think that's important. And I think that subject, I know it's something that you explore in your work. And
Yeah.
um, trauma, embodiment, and these are fortunately becoming more talked about collectively of recent times, it seems like. And I'm really happy to see that. Um, and I just had a guest a couple of weeks ago that specifically speaking to trauma. And yeah, I don't even know exactly where I want to go around this topic, but um, I guess
Mhm.
for anybody that's tuned in and unfamiliar with trauma or the impact of trauma, um, from your lens and your self-study and study of life and people, how would you say like trauma tends to impact people? Maybe if you've noticed specifically around with men in particular, and how does that show up? How does it play out? And maybe even tying that into our sexuality.
Yeah. So to me, the topic of trauma is directly linked to the topic of human potential. So to me, talking about trauma and transgenerational and collective trauma or individual trauma, it's always like an interesting conversation starts, because we are coming closer to your actual potential underneath. So I love talking about what's possible in life, and therefore I have to figure out what has what has been put in the way, like what has
Mm,
been putting the brakes onto our potential? Why are we longing for intensity and are stuck in routines? So to me, the answer is trauma. Just because I studied the nervous system, and yes, then I can say, oh, people have their comfort zones and people have their habits, but they prefer their comfort zones and they prefer their habit because they do not feel safe anymore in aliveness. And not feeling safe in aliveness comes only from trauma. It's like the very basic definition of trauma is something
Yeah.
happened too fast, too sudden. So that
Right.
is like aliveness is going on, and suddenly aliveness is not an adventure, but a too muchness. So that is me contracting in front of aliveness and shutting down around aliveness. And then I prefer the depressed state of everyday routine, but not because that's my human nature, just because that's my instinct of longing for safety. And that's
Yeah.
a thing where also when every child, for example, being suddenly overwhelmed by something, would be in a situation environment with parents or other caretakers who vibrate, who cry, who box, who run with the child in order to move this energy that has been trapped in a child's nervous system, they recover so soon. They recover so fully from traumatic events. It's really us holding on to trauma
Yeah.
by not providing a culture that knows how to unwind from trauma after the event. So I think that's the major problem. We do not even have to stop car accidents from happening. We just have to provide a very, very trauma mature, sensitive, informed society around. And all those other layers of trauma. And now I talked about shock trauma, but I think the deeper level of trauma is developmental trauma, because in those terms, I think nobody can grow up without major developmental trauma around the range of movement slash then having to sit at school, and also developmental sexual cultural trauma, because it's such a deep confusion. It's put into us so early. It's like even how our parents or somebody at kindergarten looks at us when we are naked as children, or like so many layers of subconscious messages. I think it's just not possible to grow up as a girl and not as a boy, and not as another sex, without major contractions around sexual energy. Maybe not contraction, but confusion, which ends up being the same. So yeah, and so then of course, by in case of men, them being projected onto them that because of you having a penis, because of you desiring women, we do not feel safe. That's a nightmare. So I think it's an ongoing nightmare. In that way, I have no interest in saying, oh, I'm traumatized and you are not, because I'm like, let's dive into the good news. Let's uncover potential. All of us are traumatized. Yay. So I'm really into, it's like we share this collective story. I have no interest in somebody has been that lucky that it has been paradise for him or her. It's like, why? I'm not ambitious around being healed. I'm ambitious around being truthful.
Beautiful. Yeah. Um, how how would you imagine like a new culture that sort of invited people to step more into their aliveness? Like what, based on the work that you've explored, like what do you imagine are elements that a culture would, values a culture would have, or elements that culture would contain that would support people's aliveness and true essence shining through?
Yeah. So I think a major definition of a human being is a human being that is it's defined like being based in the feet, in the legs, in the roots, in the pelvis, in the genitals, instead of in the head. So it's not my head knowledge that defines my being or justifies my existence, but it's my beingness in my legs, in my pelvis, in my belly brain. And this is such a shift. It's like it's mainly organized around energy and energetic waves instead of words or rationalism. that is a major shift in the matrix that I think would be part of a new culture. I think a new culture, we wouldn't be in a new culture being so busy with values. I mean, why having values? Why do I have to tell you, Soma, that you should be honest and polite? Because I think that you are lying because this is part of your instincts, or that you are rude or insensitive. But it is your essential egoism to be caretaking for yourself and others. It's your psychic egoism of like psychic hygiene in yourself, to be truthful with your partners and those people in your life. So to some extent, it's like, why do I need so many values? Why do we have to tame each other, educate each other? Like, because we think we are a walking error, and we are not, again.
Right.
So that is why, like, the new culture would stop asking about values. I think that's part of it. And then another thing that also, yeah, I mean, you said it so often in this call, and it's so moving, this part around men are not allowed to do this, men are not allowed to do this, they should be this, they shouldn't be that. And it's like, oh, this new world is, I think, based on us seeing that as long as I, Ilan, for example, am asking, am I allowed to do this? Am I allowed to do that? I agree to being the loser at the end of the game. Because if this outer world would give us permission, it would have given us permission altogether already. So it's not about us waiting. It's not about us asking for permission. It's us almost overcoming the question around permission and living truthfully and out of our essence and embodiment and sexuality and sexual power and wisdom inside anyway. It's almost like you might say that I shouldn't do that. And as long as I'm not violating your boundaries, I'm going my way. And it's like your opinion or your value is, it's a bit like, thanks for sharing, but no more. So in that way, for example, I would dream for us women stopping blaming men, like, because you are not changing, I can't unfold my next step in whatever this partnership, and vice versa. Like, there is so much beauty in this. I think, for example, when men or women are fully reclaiming their power, they would change the whole planet overnight, and they would give the gift of this new world to the other sex overnight, just easy. That means we do not need each other. We shouldn't feel dependent on each other. And in that way, I dream, like, it makes me so happy when I imagine that there is a street full of men who are just so much glowing in gratitude for them being men and for enjoying their sexual energy and full of appreciation for the women. And there is so much peace and safety for all of us in that. I like, yeah, it's the sudden absence of all of those abusive little moments that make all of us feel not safe. So these are a few. This is a rough sketch of tomorrow.
Yeah.
Tonight.
Yeah, it's good. I mean, I like to dream about these things, and because that's, it's a big part of my passion is sort of, being in the reinvention of culture that really serves us all and serves the planet, right? And
yes, and
yeah,
the planet is wonderful. It's so connected.
Right. Yeah, like as an extension of us, of our own aliveness, right? Yeah, and I think, it's this funny, like, I don't know if it's a paradox or what, but like what I'm taking away from what you shared is, and this is sort of similar to some of my own exploration of, the intelligence of the body on like just a very primal level. And if it was allowed to be what it is without trying to control it in any way, and if we lived more in that sensitive awareness that is the body, that, maybe we wouldn't need so many of these like hierarchical systems of controlling people, right, and ruling over, and maybe that's just a reflection of what we've done to our own bodies in a way.
Yeah, definitely. It's really like a falling apart of the the necessity of all those rigid structures and rules, because it basically, our rules and values try to imitate what has been destroyed in us in the very first place. So if we stop traumatizing our caretaking essence, then we wouldn't need the kind of compensation.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, makes sense. Yeah, I want to bring the topic back to your book a little bit, because there's a couple of chapters in there that I thought would be interesting to share a little more around. One being, there's a chapter in there, slow sex, and a sort of experiment that you did with your partner for a period of time, and yeah, I'd love to hear you explain a little bit about that process, and what you learned from it, and because I think this is something for me in particular that, and I don't know if this is part of these, like, this confusion that I live with as a man, and whether it's like my biology or cultural programming that has me, or has had me,
You're a bit
in certain ways.
frozen. I think I get what you're saying, but you're frozen a bit. I mean, I can jump in talking about slow sex just in case that you stopped talking. So I'm okay. Yeah, here you are.
Okay, looks like I'm back. All right, I don't know where I got cut off, but yeah, I'll just share it again, in probably a different way. Yeah, just touching on the topic of the chapter you wrote around slow sex, and approaching our sexuality differently. And I was just sharing a bit about my own experience as a man in a male body, and how there is this confusion around, like, whether it's like cultural programming or just my biology that has me run sexual energy in a certain way and have a certain agenda or pacing, right? And I think most men that have experienced sex with women have, in general, this is generally speaking, they find that, like, women's arousal happens a lot slower than a man's, right? And yeah, so I guess I'm just curious about what you learned in your experiment around slow sex, and maybe anything, yeah, like that.
Yeah. Yeah. So to me, slow sex was basically a recovery, because also when I mentioned that I'm traumatized, I think for me, I was very aware of the fact of trauma, which also then leads to numbness or shutdown because I'm hypersensitive. So to me, of course, working as a prostitute, I was so happy for those 2 years. I was like, oh, I will never do something else. That's just perfect. But after prostitution, I really got into, okay, this is just sexual conditioning. And I was very numb in my genitals. So maybe also number than other women who like paid more attention to with whom am I having sex and which kind of sex. However, I think it also was a basic reflection of what is put into our genitals anyway, just consuming porn, or just our normal idea of how sex looks, or how much you move during sex, or how fast, as you say, a certain pacing. All of that, it puts so much confusion into our individual sexuality. I'm not saying it's completely wrong for everybody. I'm just saying every sexuality is individual. It's just, it doesn't make sense that one stereotype in sex works for everybody. So slow sex was my recovery in two aspects. First aspect was basic resensitization of my vagina, because it was so much around time. I had sex like every day for 3 hours, moving not at all. It's like cold turkey for anything around performance, which was so hard for me. And it was even harder for my partner, because he was conditioned around, oh, performance and erection and hard on, and then having to let go of all of that because there was no arousal, there was no stimulation, there was no aim. It just made him freak out. And so the first thing was, it was a resensitization for the tissue of the penis and the vagina. And I think that's the major benefit that comes from slow sex. If people jump into that, I'm not saying slow sex is the better sex. I'm just saying when you go through a period of slow sex, you kind of have an update. How much am I a slave of my routines when I'm having sex? And how much can I allow sexual energy to unfold on its own? And I can direct it, and I can use it in a certain way. I can channel it in a certain way, but I can instead of I must, because it happens automatically. So it was basically me resensitizing myself. And the second aspect was really an update around how much conditioning is in our sexual concept. So slow sex is not a technique. It's basically putting the genitals into each other in a kind of position with the body, with the bodies, that both partners can fully relax without the genitals then sliding out of each other. And then I could say waiting. I mean, at the beginning, like, yeah, then you have a slow sex book, and then the slow sex book describes that the love flows and flows and flows, and the genitals are glowing. And then you're waiting for all those miracles to happen, and nothing happens. And then you're like, oh my God, this is the worst sex of my life. I want to die. She will leave me. He will leave me. Oh my God. And then you wait. And I think this is, it's a basic first phase that came up for everybody in the beginning, because in the beginning our genitals are like, hey, do something with me when you want me to do some fireworks, and then we are not doing, we are just being, and that's so scary. And to me, I felt completely numb. It was very, very hard for me to stand this kind of I don't feel anything. But then me waiting through this waiting period, which is unfortunately the first one for all of us, it really unfolds an inner energetic intelligence that we normally overrun with our sexual activity. And so I'm not into, and then I got to know many couples where the woman is, oh, slow sex is great, and the man is like, and it's a bit boring sometimes. So I'm not into, hey man, you have to shift from your sexual routines or what you love to complete slow sex. It's just that I never ever experienced anything more effective than slow sex for a certain period of time in order to really overcome the self terrorization around I have to have an erection and I shouldn't come before the woman. I mean, just these two components, it's so much stress in the nervous system of a man. And it's like, it's not out of interest for the woman, it's out of interest from you towards yourself. It's like, get rid of this conditioning. That's just insane. It's a level of stress and duty that nobody has the right to put into you. And for getting rid or overcoming this deep conditioning, slow sex is the most brutal and most effective medicine ever.
Yeah, that's really cool. Yeah, and I know the performance piece for men is such a big weigh in on identity sometimes, like who our value as a lover, what what we need to be. And even that can be, even the slow sex could eventually maybe be used against us too, right? Like we're not being slow enough. So we got to be careful with all of it. But I guess what I'm hearing is just an invitation to let the agenda go, let the pressure go, and hopefully if you are in a partnership, you can invite that in a way that creates maybe a different kind of intimacy, a different way of connecting, and a space where maybe there is like a resensitization of the genitals, and an opportunity just to experience sexuality beyond like it needing to be an active thing, but that it's like an energy that maybe has like an intelligent flow to it.
Yeah, sex being a nourishing thing, not a burning
Hmm.
thing.
Yeah, that
Mm.
sounds really good. Yeah. Um, yeah, and there was one word that really came out of reading your book that felt like just a quality that I find really powerful, that you know is to me part of this kind of evolution of where we're headed in a way, possibly. And that word is around innocence. And it's often like the opposite word that I think culturally we would equate with sexuality. Um, but it feels like the space where a lot of this new way of relating can happen.
Mhm. Yeah, a new way of relating and also a new, like an updated self understanding. There is
Hmm.
no guilt being built into us. There is no such thing like that. So it is the basic innocence of just contributing with my existence to existence, like just being part of that. It's a very simple thing, like no question, no answer. So this peaceful, peacefully experienced direct innocence inside, I think even that would make all of us in our behavior towards others so much more peaceful and easy, because we are not running around with this kind of presumption that we are a problem and are running into problems, or are meaning a problem for others. It would be, yeah, I think to some extent, this whole healing of the world or saving the world is just saving myself. It's a very egoistic thing. Just look
Hmm.
into your own eyes and really see yourself. Really see. Just that.
Hmm. Yeah. What would that be like? Mhm.
Yeah. We already covered that. Everybody would be happy and grateful, and would be immersed in the uniqueness and the deliciousness of of senses, of aliveness,
Hmm.
not hiding behind walls,
Yeah,
and having
that sounds.
support when times are rough.
Hmm. Yeah, the support piece is I'm a big believer in that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, so Ilan, we're kind of coming to the end of the live version of this conversation, where I want to shift over and open it up to the men that are actually in the Zoom room here, and take it down off of Facebook, just to honor their privacy and to create a little bit of a safer space here. And but I want to give you an opportunity for anybody that's listening on Facebook Live, for you to share anything about your work, anything that you are currently offering, promoting, anything.
Mm.
Yeah,
Thank you. Hi,
yeah.
Facebook. I feel like being published to the whole world when I'm talking to Facebook. So, yeah, let me share something around, I think, the potential of internet, because as long as you can pronounce my name, or spell my name, I'm easy to find in the internet, and you're so super welcome. But also, I think you already have a community that's also awesome. Um, I want to share something around the internet being, for me, a real adventure of creating a collective nervous system. So I think just digital interconnectedness is a super useful thing when it comes to really creating new fields of information and new energies and new kinds of communities. And what I'm doing research with at the moment is something I call it shaking events. And I just want to, in 1 minute, like give you a rough idea of that, because maybe you want to experiment with that in this community or anywhere. I would be super interested in your exploration around that. And it is basically doing this whole body shaking or trembling that we see in mammals in wilderness. When they come from shock, they do not go into frozen decades after that and into functioning and depression and self-blame. They go into whole body trembling. So how about us, or for example, how about you as men? Um, gathering, or even doing that alone, gathering in a circle and trembling and shaking and dancing and vibrating and sweating with your whole body to a collective topic, maybe the topic of the self-hatred of your fathers, or your sons not feeling safe being sons, or your daughters not feeling safe in this world, or whatever it is. It can be about dying forests, whatever it is, because I think, as you said, Soma, it's so connected. One living being is suffering, everyone is suffering. So how about creating embodied energetic circles that almost draw this trauma charge into the circle and really wash it through their own nervous system? And wow, when I experience that, or when I imagine that, do not underestimate your power. I mean, especially as men in the circle, do not underestimate what you are capable of. So that's a current research field, and that's something, if you want to experiment with those tools, I would be so happy about feedback. I would be so happy about what you experience there. Yeah. Oh, wow. Now from Jordan, camera off, but I see your hands. Wow. Thank you so much. So
Okay, yeah, I just
was
saw
my
that.
last,
Sounds like
my
he's
last,
happy about that. Yeah.
my last
Yeah,
thing on that.
that sounds really powerful. And I would love to, post any information about that under the video and the Facebook feed for anybody interested. Sounds like a way to collectively, do some of the healing work, and it's a really interesting approach to, I've done bioenergetic shaking and that kind of stuff, but to actually have an intention around
Yeah.
move this energy from my nervous system, maybe for the collective too, right?
Yeah.
um,
And to
yeah.
me, like the times I've done that with groups online and offline, it's amazing how that shifts the topic. It's amazing how it shifts the mood and the energy. So, and at the same time, of course, you can post something. I mean, my website is ilanstephani.com. However, I didn't publish so much around shaking events. So this wasn't a promotional clip for one of my
Okay.
things. It was a promotional clip for you doing wherever you are with whoever you want. Like,
Okay.
yeah, it's
Yeah.
like, let's save the world first, or whatever, or doing that simultaneously. But just for you to know, I share it as a
Yeah.
research, because I want all of us to be this cutting edge next generation all together. It's so much more fun and so much more powerful, and especially I think men gathering. So I don't want to miss the opportunity.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I'll take you up on that offer, and I'll host something like that myself at some point. Yeah. All right. Great. Well, thank you everybody on Facebook for tuning in, and you can obviously find Ilan on Facebook, probably on Instagram as well, and I will post some links under the video for anybody that's curious to learn more. See y'all later. All right. So gentlemen, we're not ending the call there for everybody that's here. So I want to invite you guys that are here we're no longer live on Facebook. So if you're comfortable, you can bring your video on so we can see your beautiful faces and where you are. And I'll ask you to stay muted, just, unless you have something to share, but this is an opportunity for anybody that wants to pop on, ask a question, anything that came up from the conversation that has inspired you or inspired like a deeper inquiry. This is a great time for you to bring that. Yeah. Sky, you got something?
Yeah, a few things came up. For sure, one of the major ones that I've kind of been dealing with in my relationship is, I'll give you a little background. I met my wife 4 years ago, and fell instantly in love, and
I can't understand you, Sky.
Moved in together right away. Like,
Sky, I can't hear you acoustically. Sorry. Or somebody has to refresh.
Let me try changing my audio.
Yeah, and it seems like maybe it could be an internet connectivity thing. it could help. I'm going to mute myself to see if that's affecting it, but also maybe turning off the video and just doing audio could work as well. So
how's that? Can you hear me better now?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So yeah, I was saying that kind of the issue that I've been going through with my wife, pretty much most of our relationship, we met about 4 years ago and fell instantly in love and moved in together, and we just like made love for like 3 months straight, just like all day long. It was like a huge, amazing healing thing for both of us. But shortly after that time period, my wife had a realization that she had like a memory of being raped some years before, and it totally changed the dynamic of our relationship and our sexuality, and kind of put me in a place where I always kind of feel like I have to hold back and be careful not to like trigger her in any way, because there's like places on her body that if I touch might trigger her. And it's definitely like put a whole damper on our sexual relationship, and it's translated into, you know, huge problems in all areas of our relationship. And I was wondering if you had any advice with, you know, navigating that kind of dynamic.
Yeah. I mean, yes and no. It's a super moving story and a super strong story that you tell. And I'm very shy around like now giving some advice. I think regarding the communication and also the sexual communication, it seems like pretty perfect between the two of you in terms of you really caretaking and both of you are really communicating about that. I mean, she tells you why she doesn't feel safe, etc. So I think there might be more moves or more forms of touch that provide a basic sense of safety and building up intimacy from there. However, another thing I think is also then by her being triggered in you, that also we covered in this conversation, which is like, as a man, you are walking too muchness anyway. So I really, really hear you saying, okay, you are holding back with your energy because it's triggering her, etc., etc. And there, I would say, try to find as many spaces as possible, also independently from your relationship, where you can really, really let go of control. If it's boxing or running or whatever, but it's a very physical, very energetic whole body movement. I think this really helps. And also roaring and going into your voice. I think this really, really helps in terms of, to some extent, we are always these domesticated animals, and we are suffering from that anyway. So it's almost a good invitation from life that you have to recover from this cultural shutdown that is put especially onto men. So to some extent, I think her trauma trigger brought something to the surface that was also waiting in you, in terms of you holding back or feeling like too much anyway. And if you are too much, or if you are too much with your energy for her in certain situations, are you too much for yourself? So this is another aspect that I would look into, and going into very physical, very energetic whole body movement is something that I think is healing on many levels. That has just, this culture has been putting that into you, and not especially this relationship. So it's almost like reading sexual patterns as energetic patterns that are running your life anyway, and also independently from the woman and her trigger landscape. So does that make sense? This part around not holding back as an energetic man? I'm not sure if you're muted.
You're muted. Yeah, there he goes. I think. Yeah.
I was kind of having trouble hearing the last bit there. I think I'm gonna have to listen to the recording. My audio got messed up when I took off my headphones.
Okay.
Yeah. Did you catch any of that? Just want to see if there's
I
any
caught most
reflection.
of it.
Yeah. you know, I think what I heard was just sort of an invitation to get more comfortable, independent of your woman, in your own body and kind of primal energy and all the force that you are physically in the world. Is
Yeah.
that accurate, Ilan?
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
I mean, and that's the only thing that we can approach independently from also then talking about her and her process, which of course is whole about another story. So I think this this urge for clarify something in the relationship, so often there are so many parts of us in that are basically about us with ourselves or with a collective heritage that has been there before, but it has been subconscious. So in that way, I also see a gift in these dynamics, because it makes it brings to the surface that I can endanger you by saying you are too much, and I can inform you about you are too much for me, but I shouldn't be able to inform you about you being too much. So that's a basic thing that you can recover from.
Yeah, I feel that. I mean, I've definitely been indoctrinated or influenced by society in my own sexuality, and definitely have a lot of shame just, being a man. And I kind of feel like sometimes I'm walking around with the sexuality of a bonobo monkey, but like, at the same time, I would never approach a woman unless she, gave that kind of openness to me, and that's totally influenced who I've partnered with in life. I've always been one to like wait for a woman to signal the availability, and felt shameful for having any kind of like, not aggression, but just being assertive even, is like something that I subconsciously look down on myself and stop myself from being.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's unlearning looking down on yourself.
Yeah. I just want to take a moment, and just gentlemen listening, like how many of you can kind of relate to what that last piece that Sky just shared? If you can, just raise your hand so we can see. I know I can. Yeah. Yeah. Well, thank you for sharing that. Yeah, appreciate you bringing that, Sky.
You're welcome.
Yeah. Yeah, well, we probably have time for maybe one or two more shares if somebody wants to jump in with a question. Jason?
Sure. Well, first of all, thank you for your time, Ilan. I really just really loved hearing your openness and experience. I'm going to order the book actually right after this. Haven't had a chance to read it yet, but I was wondering what your thoughts might be related to kind of like app culture. I guess to speak personally, as things have kind of opened up again, I'm kind of doing more dating again, which hadn't been happening a lot. I'm in my like late 20s, and I found this interesting dynamic between like with people that I've met through like dating apps, like the interaction there versus when I actually meet them in person. Specifically like sexually, I think is very interesting, because when you're using the app, you're kind of hiding behind it. But then when you actually meet up with the person, there's almost like this mutual, this just happened to me last week, like this mutual sense of like shock of like, oh, okay, we're actually meeting. Then it's weird because I want to say it's like one person's fault or the other. Almost like this, where do things go? Because I still kind of have like a love-hate relationship with the apps, because on the one hand they're convenient, but at the same time I don't view them as natural as, say, kind of like what Sky was saying earlier, like actually meeting in person, which I think I'm trying to do more of, but because of the last year, I think the apps became like sort of a second nature thing for me. So I don't know what thoughts you have on like that experience, like the apps, and how specifically maybe from the both like the women's the feminine perspective, like what might be occurring for a woman when she's finally agrees to meet in person, in terms of what's either expected or whether more of an overt sort of sexuality is expected, it potentially depending on like what was talked about. So I don't know if you have any thoughts on that.
Yeah. So to be honest, I cannot say anything around the actual like sexual meeting or meeting for sex or whatever after having met each other through an app, because I know that it's always unique. So there is no such thing like a woman expects this instead of this. In general, people need to feel safe with each other. It doesn't mean they need many candlelight dinners or much time, but they need to feel safe with each other in order to do something else than just a kind of weird performance where I could say the soul is not really present. I do not want to overstretch the term soul, but there is something very biological to if blood is meant to flow into your genitals, you just need a basic resource in your nervous system that's something like, I'm existentially safe in this situation. Because if I do not feel that, I just go for fight or flight instead of for sex or anything around contact. So coming from there, I think women are at least subconsciously aware of the fact that they go into a certain kind of risk when they are meeting somebody in person that they got to know via app. So if you are just aware of that, even though it doesn't make sense because you are like, well, I'm not a typical perpetrator, I'm sorry, I'm also nervous, hello. But just knowing that even though it's so irrational, she doesn't carry around that she can throw everybody out of her apartment. She just doesn't embody that, even though her body is totally capable of doing that. So I think that's a huge shift, that you are not thinking just because I'm nervous and she's nervous, the kind of being nervous is the same. It's not. It's really not.
Yeah. And I also think
that, and knowing that, I think that's a basic good ingredient for meeting and for tuning in and for asking without then going into I'm just asking and I'm just people pleasing, of course. And the other thing around app is a bit like a brothel. It's a safe space. People are scared of each other, so let's hide behind an app. I have no judgment around that, but it's just that the moment you jump into the in-person contact, you are thrilled or almost shocked by the intensity and reality of aliveness and of embodiment. So I think part of a new culture is a culture where we are not so scared of being seen and where we do not have to hide. We can use apps for fun, but using apps because there is no other way but apps and alcohol to get to know each other, I think that's a trauma symptom of the culture. It's not to blame the people. I understand fully, but it's not something that I think is a kind of progress into a golden future.
I completely agree with that. And I think that's more of a cultural aspect of it is it's like, it's convenient, but it's not fully natural. It's not like how, you look at animals don't meet each other through a separate interface. The experience, being in person experience, and that's why, like, I think I have female friends and things like that I've known for a long time, and that feels more natural. Mm-hmm. But I think with that, if there's like a platonic feeling that's been built, then that kind of is there. And I think maybe both for me, and I think it's sort of a mix of societal but also personal, is it's possible that I viewed the app as sort of a, like you said, like a safe space. But at the same time, I think there's sometimes this subconscious aspect to the apps, which is it's safe, but it's also, then when you actually do end up potentially meeting, whether or not the person is getting, whether you and the other person is getting the real other, like what they're getting is, it's still not entirely certain. And so there's like this maybe subconscious fear of sort of anxiety, or even like fear of whether the person, like who that person is. And I think it's hard too, because I often think like, I wish, like, why, if we just didn't have the apps, people would probably be more willing, to just meet naturally, which I know is possible, but I almost feel like it's become a crutch, especially maybe with my age group. So it's just sort of, I guess one of the struggles too is like being intentional. Is I've tried not to be intentional through the app about what I'm looking for. Like, how do I say this? Like, I've tried to be relatively level steady on the apps, because I've found sometimes people they might feel more like they may not feel ready for someone to be overt about what their expectations are. They want it to be more kind of casual. But I think that that's both a blessing and a curse, because then when you do end up meeting, it's hard to know where things might go from there.
Yeah. I mean, it's an experiment, because we skip a part of getting to know each other, which has been studied by our nervous system for a few millions of years. So it's a jump. There is an iPhone, and then there is sex. It's like, wow, how did we get here? Like, did we dance?
Right.
Did we breathe? Did we move through the jungle with each other? So it's a risk, yes, for everybody.
Yeah. But I was just thinking, I mean, one of the things is maybe just to be, I mean, I haven't gone on like a ton of dates through apps. Most of the time I've tried to do it just in person. But I think one of the thoughts I have is, if I do end up using that again, like, just to be acknowledging that in the awareness, because I think that can kind of break the ice of, okay, we've met, we've only seen a two-dimensional version of each other, and it's okay to say, like, this is weird, it's somewhat weird, but now we're here.
Yeah.
So
beautiful. Exactly.
Yeah. Thank you, though.
Thank you.
Yeah, I love that, Jason. There's something about just acknowledging the awkwardness of it that actually I think can create some safety. It's sort of like speaking to the strange elephant in the room, and that might invite a deeper level of connection potentially. So yeah, thanks for sharing that. Who else is here and wants to have a moment of spotlight and attention and maybe ask a question? We've probably got time for one more if anybody wants to share. And that's totally fine if nobody has anything. Yeah. Well, I want to invite everybody to take a breath about that. Yeah. Cool. Well, since there's nothing specific here, not sure why why Jason's still on the picture, but oh wait, we got Sky jumping in. Cool.
Can you hear me? Okay.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah. So I guess I'll just talk a little bit more about some things that came up for me. One major thing, I almost broke into tears actually when Ilan was talking, because just when you were speaking to the level of acceptance that women can have for men, it's something that I know for myself I'm so longing. It's like it's one of those things that can make me like completely soften and, you know, come into my true essence, I think. And it's something that I had with my first fiance who passed, and I've only had it, you know, briefly at times with other women since then. So yeah, I think that's definitely a huge thing that women are lacking in this society from, you know, whatever kind of influences that have created, you know, the fear of accepting man's sexuality and whatnot.
Hmm. It's a sharing, Sky, or it's a question, because it's super moving and touching to listen to your words. And I'm also very like what I hear also is your direct energetic connectedness to this huge collective suffering, which is gold. It's such a treasure that you know from your individual life the burden of the collective. I think it's the deepest pain in this cultural matrix, that there is no space for appreciating and seeing each other's essence left because of confusion and presumptions. So yeah, I'm very, very touched by your sharing.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, that's pretty much what it was, just a sharing.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that too. And I can also resonate with that piece, Sky. Definitely have longed for that kind of deep acceptance of like being seen for who I am. And, yeah. Yeah, so I think we're going to close this call. Yeah, thank you everybody for being a part of the tribe and bringing your questions and being vulnerable and just being present and showing up and listening and being willing to learn. And thank you so much, Ilan, for sharing your time and yeah, all of the devotional work you've been doing around healing trauma and exploring the body, and you know, really, I think being an example of a lot of what I heard in Sky's share is like being, you know, being willing to see men for who they are, and see their essence, and see beyond the cultural stories that get projected onto a lot of men, and that in itself is very healing. Yeah.
Thank you for inviting me into this men's circle.
Thank
Very
you.
special evening. Thank you. Thank you for being here with us.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Mm.
All right, everybody. Well, wherever you are in the world, I hope you have a beautiful day or evening, and see you next time.
See you. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.